Thank you for joining me, Delna. It is an honor to have you for the inaugural episode of Revenue Beacon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Delna, you had an inspiring journey so far, and even today you are doing great things. Could you please share with us your journey from Tata Motors to establishing your own consulting practice?
That's a fascinating one. I get asked that a lot. Firstly, it's really about what resonates with you. What is your own journey? And for me, I have always been someone who's kind of marched to my own beat. And this is something that I kind of tell people. So for me, I have always planned my life in decades. It sounds weird. And whenever I say that, I mean, of course, the term plan in decades is more recent, right? But even when I was a young girl and I would look around me, I was like, what do I want to be in life? What do I want to do? I come from a very simple Parsi household. So if you come from a simple Parsi household, you have a lot of leaders that you look up to in the community. And I observed two kinds of behaviors. So I had one behavior where people were happy and took that for granted. And I was one of those people who kept feeling, oh my God, I have all of these stalwarts. What is my role? What am I going to contribute to the world? Sounds very lofty. And it was actually very weird when I was growing up as well, because I kept thinking, what do I want to be? The Tata Group as a group is something that resonated with my value system as a child because I was exposed to it. So dad worked in telco, a mom worked in a bank. So we had a lot of conversations around it. Because I was very ambitious even as a child, they said, why don't you join TAS? And that's how TAS kind of became something that I wanted to join as a child itself, right? And the idea of TAS also was you get exposed to a lot of companies, you're part of it. It was a simple upbringing. So it was a lot about, work for someone. And it made sense. It kind of helped me tick off whatever was working in my mind as a teenager, as a 20-year-old. It was clear that, okay, I'm working in a great group. I get an opportunity to work in a lot of industries. I worked across geographies. So I was fortunate to work in Europe for 4 years. I went off to Thailand and worked in ASEAN then for 4 years. Came back to India, did transformation turnarounds. And the career trajectory was very, very sharp. So I kept growing. I kept getting the kind of responsibility I wanted. I always put my hand up and said, give me more, and they gave it. They put their trust in me. Of course, forget about all the other things that would happen along the way. That's part and parcel of a corporate career. But I think somewhere at the back of my mind, it always was there that I wanted to have something of my own, right? And while the group allowed me to kind of do things which were big and impactful, believe you me, at some points I felt it was not big enough. And so this is a very ironical thing to say, because if you look at my practice, it's a tiny little practice in the size of the group, or forget the group, even if you look in the consulting world, it's a tiny little practice, right? But for me, it was always about the mindset. Am I getting the opportunity to kind of do more and more and more? And am I landing up doing the same thing over and over again? So I think I paid off whatever I had to pay off in terms of a thank you to the group when I did the final transformation. I was literally brought back to India being told, you've got to do this for the group. So I said, okay, I will do this for the group. And then I said, you know what, I'm ready to fly. And so it really, my consulting practice was something that kind of grew from whatever I had acquired as knowledge, right? From a transformation perspective, from turnarounds, from market entries, from, making businesses which were, so you see the group is really large, but people don't realize there are lots of pockets of things which are not going as well, right? So because I had the opportunity to do turnarounds and profitable turnarounds, I learned a lot of that. I also learned to do that across geographies. So naturally, my consulting practice was an extension of that. And I was able to now do this in multiple industries, right? So the journey has been something that's been very, very organic and smooth, because believe you me, my first book was bought when I was in England in 2004-05, when I picked up this book called, Business Valuations and How to Start Your Business. And I joke because I was a dummy then, I picked up the dummy's guide for it. So, it was really funny. But that's when I thought of it, right? So by the time you finally landed it in 2016-17, you have been kind of churning those ideas for a while. It's been seamless. They were some of my first clients actually came from the group. And it's just been an amazing journey because you're being true to yourself and you're not terribly bothered about judgment around you. So yeah, that's a very long answer to a very simple question.
Not really. That gives me a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity in my head, because what you have talked about is touching upon various aspects, right? Of your personal ambitions, of your large group association, and kind of doing an intrapreneurship within Tata Group, if I can call it, right? So that kind of is a natural segue into a full-fledged entrepreneurship that you're doing now. So let's start one by one. The first question is, Tata Group is very well known for its strong values and ethical practices, right? It is known for shaping people as natural leaders. So how do you feel that Tata value framework influenced your leadership style and kind of give you that clarity when you make decisions throughout your career and even today when you consult and advise your client in their decision making? I'm sure that would be having some role to play, right?
A big role to play, not some. You see, because you know what I said when I said the why Tata Group, it was a natural group because, as I said, I was exposed to it, great respect internally, obviously known for its value system, its ethics. So it was a natural choice for a young child to kind of look at that, look up to it and say, you know what, this is a great place I can start my career. And I know that it'll be easy to work here, right? It's something that it was a childish notion. It was not easy. But what I would say was easy was the value system side of it, right? When I joined, it was a very interesting time for the group itself. So I joined as part of TAS. And even the TAS selection was brutal. I mean, we were probably after that, it's become a lot simpler because they go to campus and pick up like it happens with most other companies. But for us, we had a 3-day selection with each round being an elimination and we were centers, right? So it was a tough selection. Of course, I prepared for it. So it was okay. I made it through, right? But that was a time when a lot of changes were happening in the group itself. And there was something called the Tata work levels that came about, where they started looking at what is it that the leadership practices do you want within the group? What is it? How do you kind of codify it, right? And because I joined Tata Group at that time as a TAS officer, we got exposed a lot more to that way of being assessed. So even though I would be posted into a company, we did have our assessment coming in from the center. So as a result of that, the entire leadership framework on how you are evaluated literally became a part and parcel of who you are, right? So you kind of imbibe that in it. And it was interesting because there were 14 leadership practices around 3 clear pillars. So the business pillar, the results pillar, and the people pillar. And in all, you had these 14 leadership practices. Each of them was then defined for depending on what level you are, initial managerial level or the executive, because it's going right from initial managerial to the CEO, right? So you actually had what is a displayed behavior that you should have around these parameters. And because of this entire framework, you literally land up imbibing that into you. And then it becomes like default, like breathing, right? In the way you look at people, the way you look at yourself first, and then the way you look at people. Let me give you an example. So for instance, in business, and I don't wish to give the framework because that's not my role to do, but just to give you an idea, you would have things within that which were saying things like managing vision and purpose, managing. So how do you kind of translate that? And you're assessed on, there is a 5-point scale at a managerial level, 5-point scale at an executive level, right? And what is a displayed behavior for your level? And do you display that behavior or do you display more of that behavior? So it's a brilliant framework, right? And so you'd have things like strategic capability, innovation management, you'd have, drive for results. I'm mixing all of them up purposely, but you have each of these things which are, or in people's side, it's taking ownership, but it's also interpersonal effectiveness, but it's also building teams. It's also withstanding pressure. So how do you manage yourself as an emotional? So if you see, even in each of these, there were different kind of a rating scale of sorts. And now guess what happens? If you've done this, and I left after 15 years, and even when I switched over, once we're after the first 5 years, you get absorbed into a company. Even after getting absorbed in a company and adopting their way of assessments, this stays at the back of your mind. always, never goes away, right? And so that kind of has carried forward in the way I look at things. I look at people, I look at planning, I look at managing myself, of course, but also in the way I assess. One of the biggest challenges you have is that people get assessed at the point you are, or your frame of reference, right? And that is where a lot of the challenges start. So this framework or this way of thinking allows you to remember what is the demonstrated behavior you expect at the level, and what is it that you will, how do you help a person move that? So I think the beauty of the group was always, it was always very understanding of the fact that people have different journeys as a professional, and how do you facilitate that rather than belittle that, but at the same time, how do you reward people who are faster? A very important thing that many people miss. So why is there such a strong core of the Tata group, or why is it that it's so much in your DNA, or why is it that it's a very rare Tata employee who has left the group who will speak badly about the group? You will rarely ever find that. Even if they've had a bad time at the group or they've had a bad boss, right? They will not speak badly about the group, because there is something amazing about that DNA that kind of builds it. And you know, they always try to do right. And I think that is what makes a lot of difference. So people take it away saying, you know what, they as a group try to do it right. Even if at an individual something went wrong. So I think that is something that I practice a lot, and it's really now like breathing. So I don't even think about it. When you ask the question is when I'm articulating it, I don't articulate it anymore, you know, so.
So yeah, absolutely. And that resonates a lot. It kind of becomes muscle memory if it is done early on, right? This is more like when you teach a child certain things, it becomes a natural instinct. And the same thing Tata Group does for its people. I remember when I was in Pilani, one reason people would love TCS as an employer is because of their initial 1 year of the training period that they would have. It was phenomenal, right? And you're talking about the same time when these changes were taking place. So I can now relate to the conversation that I was having in college that time in 2001 time frame. And
I'll give you one. I'll give you one thing extra here. When you said this, it's very fascinating. As TAS, we had something called a Bharat Darshan, right? And basically, Bharat Darshan meant that you literally went from company to company, company to company. You went to the ground level. You went to stuff that is done at a foundation level by the various companies. You went into the plants. You also had a conversation with the managing director or the directors. So you literally got an exposure, and that is a kind of investment that was made in that. So what you're saying,
right?
Yes, I mean, that's a great memory that you triggered for me as well. That investment in actually onboarding or making you understand is an important part. Please continue. You were saying.
Kind of exposing you to different ideas, different perspectives. And right from the lowest end of the value chain to the highest end of the value chain. So it's like you see that how the person at MD level is thinking and how it is getting translated at a factory shop floor probably. And you could also appreciate the good things as well as figure out the gaps, right? Obviously the management thinks, but the ground level reality could be different. So this journey is very beautifully done by Tata. They have actually mastered it, I would say.
And I will add one more thing here for you as well, is that the Tata principles, right? So a lot of people say there are values, and the values are actually lived, because the last bit as well. So we have our value around responsibility, which is whatever comes from the people goes back to the people many times over. And that literally is something you've got to remember. I mean, I could just rattle it off, right? But as you're talking, some of these things literally come back to memory up front. And that is really how we were, because like you said, the shop floor, but you also go out and you see what's happening in Meetapur with the what your foundation level stuff is happening. So it's not just saying it ends at just going to Tata Chemical Factory. It also goes forward to seeing what's happening beyond into the society around you. Or in Jamshedpur, I worked in Tata Steel for a bit, and what you can see the impact beyond just Tata Steel employees, you know, and that is the kind of stuff that really kind of stays with every employee.
Yeah, and in these days, like the MNCs talk about the stickiness, people switch jobs quite often because I feel that this is something that they are unable to crack as a group, as a company. That you need to build that association, you need to build that feeling of a community and make a person feel that he's making a contribution to a bigger cause, right? That's what Tata Group does very well.
But the reason that the group is able to do this very well is because they're not trying.
Yes, it is natural, right?
And it is natural because our founder was that way. The next generation, whether it was Jamshedji Tata, whether it was his sons Zora and Ratan, whether then it was JRD Tata, then whether it was Ratan Tata, everyone, or even the middle Saklatwala was there. Everyone has actually lived it. And then of course Cyrus, and then now Chandra. So each person who has kind of taken it has taken it through in a way that is natural, organic, honest. The minute you try to do it in a way which is fake, or which is too structured, or which is too because I'm trying to get a goal achieved. So in our case, we have a very simple thing, righteousness for the sake of righteousness. So your best good for the sake of doing the best good. That is something that's a philosophy for us in our community as well. And so when you're trying to do it for an extra purpose or for some extra credit, that is when you will not get the results. When you're doing it for the sake of actually just that goal, you'll get it.
Absolutely. I was talking to another person in Tata Group, and we had this brief conversation around DEI initiatives. And his response was very beautiful. We don't even have to think about it because we do it naturally. And that is why you never see Tata saying that we are doing something on DEI, while others are actually becoming sensitive about it, right?
So I think a lot of credit goes to Dr. Ritwan for some of the work that she did with TCS, which was one of the biggest employers of women as such, right? I mean, employers as numbers, and then of course the kind of number of women that you see there. And I think, again, I see that TCS never made a big song and dance about it, right? And I think it flows right from the management, whether it was, from Ramadurai or Chandra or then Rajesh or now, it's very natural for that company, which actually employs so many people, to actually just do it. They live it, right? So I think what you're saying is true. Many people don't even know that we had actually put an ACE line in Pantnagar, where there were, and I'm talking of ACE line Pantnagar long back, where we had women on the shop floor. We had that in Sanand when we did some of the Nano work. Then, of course, in Tiago came in. And then, of course, now a lot of conversation is happening around the Harrier Safari line, where there are a lot of female workforce, so to speak. And that's the other thing, right? The entire thing about, and I say this, I correct everyone, because very often I get told, oh, you're a female leader or woman leader or whatever. I say, you never say male leader, man leader. I never hear that, right? Leader is leader. And that is the kind of behavior we at least faced within the group. We didn't have this unnecessary push. Individual level, yes. Group level, no.
So let's drift away from Tata Group now and come into the consulting space, right?
Sure.
In your consulting practice, right, you would be working probably with corporates as well as startups. Some are aiming for transformative growth. Some are trying to figure out the disruption piece that is happening around the world. So how do you guide these leaders to break free from the comfort zone, to thrive in their careers, lead a fulfilling life, at the same time grow the company? And one particular thing that I'd like to hear from you is, do you find acceptance for this balanced approach that Tata Group normally carries, versus do you need to coach them that you need to create this kind of balance in your company to have that broad-based long-term growth?
Lots of questions in that one question. So let me start. So my consulting practice, it's quite weird, because a lot of my conversation outside is only about the startup ecosystem. And that's because all my work on the consulting side is driven by very, very tough confidentiality agreements, right? It's a bit of a challenge when you're a person trying to start your company and grow your company, but at least they're very generous in the referrals that I have. So word of mouth has helped me continue to get a lot of decent listed, actually some of the best listed companies in India have for pockets come to me for help, right? And why do they come for that? Because they know that there is a certain way of looking at business that I bring to the table. So let's ask her, because she knows, she's done it. So she gets our challenge, and she comes from legacy, she comes from industrial, so she gets what it is to drive any challenge in our organization. So I get that, right? But then that's the inherent thing that starts with it. All starts with the mind, always, right? Now, whether it's the individual, so whether it's a founder or it's a person at their mid-career trying to take some decisions for the senior level. It always starts with your mind. Or where there's an organization, where a promoter-led organization, which is listed, next generation has come in, or it's professionally run, but the promoter says that there is a bigger vision that I can achieve. Everywhere, somebody's mind has decided that the change has to happen. Right now, at an individual level, it's so much easier because it's yourself, right? You've got to shift that mindset. You've got to, and once you make a decision saying that I need to make a change, or I highlighted that I need to make a change, then it's really about just taking those steps. And I can always talk about what you can do as a person. Organization's a lot more complicated. Right, yeah. Because it's somebody, either it is a board member, or it is a professional CEO, or it is the promoter. Somebody says, you know what, something's not working here, or it's working, but it's not going to get me to the next level if I keep doing what I'm doing right now. That's the start, right? But the journey of transformation is a lot more complicated, whether it's an individual or whether it's a corporate. And so which would you like me to talk about first?
I think let's go for corporate, because that is the complex piece of it. Individually, I feel that the founders or founders at startups specifically are mentally prepared that they need to demonstrate certain kind of behaviors. They need to create certain kind of ecosystem. But when the wish list is something else, the reality is different, right? So that is where all these interplays come.
So I would say, let's start. Okay, so let's look at a corporate. Now, in a corporate, as I said, it starts with the person saying, yeah, I need to do that, right? But any change management needs to be done in a very structured manner, right? When there are multiple stakeholders involved. Now, a lot of times when this transformation happens, or I'm talking of business transformation, I'm not talking of digital, which has its own complexities because there's technology involved as well. And technology enabled requires a certain level of upskilling and new talent and et cetera, et cetera. But even normal business transformations where you said today I need to change, I need to build a cultural change in the way I'm doing business and be much more result oriented while balancing human emotions, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are things where you kind of have to start, first of all, by knowing where you want to go. And why I'm saying something so basic is because half the time when I talk to people, they don't know where they're going, right? They don't have an end state vision. And if you don't have an end state vision, or if you've articulated your end state vision only in number, you then have a very different trajectory versus saying an end state vision of what is a kind of company you want to be, right? So when we do transformations like a sales transformation, and by the way, those are something that I do a lot because it's my great joy, there it's easy. You turn around and say, I say easy because you turn around and say that, oh, this is X and I wish to do 2.5X. I want to do 3X. I want to do 5X, right? And then you build the building blocks to that and you get somewhere. But when it comes to the vision and purpose at a business transformation for the organization, there is a notion that exists, but not a very good clarity that exists. So first step I always say is at least decide where you want to go and don't articulate it so copying somebody else. That's the biggest problem. So I want to be the this or that. I want to be that, I want to be like that one, right? So I mean, very early on, I should say that, you know, you might want what I have, but walking in my shoes is not for everyone else. And that's not to say that I'm doing something great. It's just who I am is different from you. So why do you want to walk in my shoes? So the journey starts with end state visioning, right? Where do I want to go? Now, when I say end state visioning, you don't have to say that this is it only, but you do have to know where you want to go directionally. Right? Yeah. And then it's about big milestones and small steps. Right? Big milestones are important because it's like a checkpoint. It's like doing your PDCA, right? Did I achieve this? I plan, I did, I checked, make some changes again, act again, tuck back again to planning, right? So the PDCA cycle has to keep moving. So you need to have big milestones to see whether you're on track, whether that vision makes sense, whether you're moving in the direction. But everything is small steps. Now, when I say small steps is where if you've got to do something for a large organization or lots of people with diverse skills, expectations, all of that, you've got to recruit people at every level of the organization to drive that change. So a lot of times what happens is people recruit at the top. And in that only all the mess starts happening because there are these every peer, there's peer competition, there is peer expectation, there's peer frame of reference. Organizations, by virtue of being organizations, land up the strength, which is systems and processes, is also its weakness, right? So you have to, therefore, when you do this at various levels, and when you do it for the level at their impact level, and you have to keep increasing the numbers, right? So when you keep increasing the numbers, you actually see that impact overall. And you see that at various levels, rather than trying to say, okay, these all these heads and this little cross-functional team has been formed, but that cross-functional team has to go to the last level. And then the shift on change happens. But if you have a cross-functional team going to the last level, but you haven't articulated what is that small step you want that person to take, you will land up somewhere else. It's Alice in Wonderland then. You know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So you've got to do that. That is where anchoring becomes a challenge. That's why most transformations fail, or they become tokenism, or you don't get the impact. Because, you know, that notion translating to a vision, translating to a strategy, translating to a plan with milestones, baby steps. Who will do it? At what level? What impact? Are you doing a PDCA? Are you moving there? And are you celebrating your wins?
Very important.
Are you sharing your wins? Because very often you celebrate the win, but you don't share the win, right? So if you're not doing all of that, you don't have that movement. That shift doesn't happen.
So you've been in consulting for quite some time, and you will be coming across all sort of stories and dreams and desires. And you do that consulting, right? In your head, you know that how much of it is going to take to actually make it happen. While obviously you can't spell it out on day zero, it is a journey that will unfold with time. Do you have any memorable story to share where you had such kind of feeling at the start, but eventually you witnessed a remarkable transformation and growth in your client's business? And what was the secret sauce that actually made it happen for you?
So you're asking for a success story, right? In a way.
Yeah. Which kind of looked like a very difficult one at the start, like 30, 70 kind of?
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's an easy one for me to answer, because that's a very top of the mind one, frankly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I was a little like, there are, okay, so I'm going to answer one aspect of what you asked before I get into that success story, right?
Sure.
Very often, and since 2016, when I got into this, and I initially spent a lot of time with startups, I met a lot of people who had ideas, right? And there's a lot of hype around it. And sometimes you met people who were very divorced from reality. So you could see that the business model was broken. You knew that they're really going to struggle. They're not going to make it, right? Those are the kind of messages that are the hardest to give. You also ask yourself that, do you know enough? Maybe they'll pull it off, because there are people who can pull it off. So the way the messaging happens is a lot kinder. But at the same time, I'm not here to win a popularity contest, right? You came to me because you respected me, and you took me as one of the voices that you wanted to capture. So I give you the truth as I see it. I always give the caveat that you might prove me wrong, right? So that's a different issue. Coming to corporates, a lot of times in the early days, right, I met a lot of people who said and you have to understand, TAS, even why did JRD start the concept? Whereas he realized I have lots of companies, but I need people to look at it at a principal level. And so build your transferable skills, right? So in the way I have always approached things is from a business principle level. So invariably, when I meet new clients who are not from the automotive space in the early days, the pushback was very clearly, you don't know us and we are so great. And, so it was very amusing. And I used to laugh, and I met all sorts, right? So I met somebody in FMCG, somebody in dairy. I did all the work that person at the top really wanted. And then they said, oh, but she's never worked in dairy. And I was like, but you worked. You don't need me to work. You need what I bring to the table. Whatever is required for your industry, you have enough knowledge. I don't need to. I was pleasantly surprised when, and because of confidentiality, I'll mask it in a way that you will not figure out. But it was in industrials. The person right at the top was very clear that she doesn't need to know my industry. She needs to help me do what I want to do, right? Everyone else down the line was very against it, saying कि काय को waste कर रहे हो time and साफ नहीं होने वाला types, right? So it was a very clear case for me when he threw it as a challenge that this market of mine for the last 10 years has been stuck at this X level. And can you make it 2.5X, right? And not over some amazing amount of time, but 8 months.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, because of the way I had pitched it as well. So the fault is mine as well, right? So I talked about sales acceleration and I said, so I'll tell you at that time, the only thing in my head was that, look, he's committed, but everyone else is not, right? It's so obvious. So I told him that's all I need. I need you to ensure that you keep some of your worst critics out of that framework, but also give me some of your sharpest people who will own the process, and they need not be from the function at all, right? So that was the only ask I had. I also, and he wanted me to have skin in the game. So he said, you're variable at least a certain amount of fees that, and that was my pitch again, right? Because I'm trying to win this new industry. And I said, okay, chalo theek hai. A certain amount of my fee is linked to that result, certain is fixed. And we started. So I think the biggest thing there was the fact that we kept out some of the powerful noisemakers. He put some of his sharp people in the project who were not from the function to be like a steering committee. So, and the committee was only 3 people. So it was not like one of those tedious committees, right? 3 people, sharp people, not from the function. Now, those 3 also had something to prove. So they also wanted to prove that, yeah, we can make this happen, right? And there was a lot of support to what we were trying to do, right? So I have my entire sales acceleration is done through a framework. So I have my drivers and enablers. I haven't developed it, I've sharpened it, right? These approaches have existed. We practiced it. I've done it many, many times. I've seen it succeed. Easier when people are not, it's listed companies are a lot easier to manage if they're big, because sometimes they just, because the promoter is still running it, right? So the promoter says, I want to do it, everyone has to do it, right? Listed companies very often have so many professionals in there who kind of push back. I'm happy to report that in those months, we actually delivered 5X. And it was such a shock for everyone. So from a joy perspective, I think that will always be one of my most memorable ones. It also was interesting because it happened in that first wave, second wave ke beech mein. So I literally had never met any of them. Everything was done virtually. I had a lot more of my bandwidth and a lot to prove as well, mentally to myself as well, that I can crack it. I think they got the best of me as well as a result of that. And we did 5X. So the minute you've done that, of course, everyone is chup and more work is coming in. So exactly. I think that's the way it is, right? You've got to kind of stick your neck out. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to know what is that 1 or 2 things that you need, which could kind of derail it. Having been in large organizations myself, having seen how naysayers or how very powerful people who are against you can, destabilize the best of your jobs. I knew that that's all I needed to do. If I got those people out of the way and I got somebody else who wants to prove success, everything else is my job, right? Then you better know your job. But you should know that 1 or 2 things that can really derail your project. And if you take care of that, then it's really up to you. Then the failure success is up to you. So that's really what I did. And that's really how it goes now, because it's been, today I'm a lot more confident as well. It's much easier because you can talk about it. You can referral. All my clients are very happy with giving me a direct referral, but not public referral. So it's okay. I mean, they're big name companies. I'm glad. So their network keeps that going. But this was one of those things.
So Delna, I'm really tempted to ask this one, and you can choose to say no if you don't want to. So you said that you never met any of those people and you did twice the target that you had set for yourself. Was it that a factor that you were very ultra focused on what needs to be done, and so was everybody else? And if you were in actually in-person setting, the result could have been different. This is just a hypothetical question.
No, most of my ones before that were actually in person, right? So I've been doing these more. As a matter of fact, the virtual part of it added a lot of complexities. I think the one advantage I had was that because we were doing video off meetings,
Okay.
so if you kind of see me, I'm actually quite, I would say, I can be kind, I can laugh, I can joke, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But if you only hear me, sometimes I sound much tougher. So I have seen that. I think a lot of people had no clue who I
Who this
was,
person
right?
is,
Right.
right?
So that voice was a very strong, sometimes a very strict voice. And as a result, I think many of these people, at least who were executing, I think it triggered their teacher principal thought as habitual. And so later on,
Very
when they
interesting.
met me, they were like, "Oh, madam, aap to like." And I
Very
mean, I
different.
know what is that subtle thing that you're not saying. That you seem to be quite a pleasant, happy person, but on the call, you sounded like it was the toughest school teacher that you've ever had. So I think that definitely helped on a more lighter note. But transformations or accelerations are have always traditionally been remote, right? Because you might today do it on virtual, but even otherwise, when we do anything which is national, rarely do you go and have beyond the initial kickoff. You don't really go and do every review in person, even before the pandemic, right? So by virtue of that, it's always been a mix. But meeting does help because
Yeah.
meeting helps me assess people faster.
Absolutely.
Because there is that thing that you pick up immediately and you pick up an energy in a room, right? So you pick up the energy in a room much easier when you're in person versus that virtual, because then you don't know which out of those 10 people is going to be a bit of a problem or is going to need more help. So if anything, actually, I think that slows down some of the process because it takes you longer to figure out, oh, this person needs more help than if I had met them and if I had talked to them, it would have been something I would have picked up much faster.
Yeah. In fact, one takeaway from this story for me is you've got to keep the worst critique out of this because they are going to criticize irrespective of how things are going. And bring people who have actually something to prove, who are willing to do something. So that was like,
sometimes you won't be able to do that. You've got to take them along, and that's when you decide whether you want to do the project or not. In your corporate world, you can't decide that. In consulting, oh boy, I've been dropping projects whenever it doesn't. I fortunately have that much leeway in my life to say, if I don't like your energy, I don't work with you.
Yeah.
It really is that simple, because at the end of the day, you know what, it's your credibility. So that I would say is important, right? If you are in a position to, if you feel that this energy or this kind of attitude is not going to help you get the result and you're in a position to avoid doing it, then do that, because a long-term headache is too much.
So we talked about people aspect, we talked about business aspect. The next comes technology, right? So I've also been in technology for close to 12 years. I was working as a software product manager, software coder.
Nice.
And then I did a MBA to transition into marketing full time, right?
Okay.
Nowadays, what I'm seeing is everybody feels that my business is very unique. My business has very specific needs. And whatever software you are trying to sell, you need to prove whether it can fit into my business. And my story to them is, see, the software is proven over the several years. It is your business that should adapt to software because you want to bring the best practices inside your organization. I'm talking about global versus local, because local, you have all sort of specifics. I do it this way. My team is comfortable this way. My people have been doing it this way. So you tweak your software. You're like, no, you should actually adapt and solve the people part so that software runs vanilla. This is not about the money that we make. This is about the business tech transformation that you should be doing. So on tech, I'll actually go to the AI part of it, right?
Okay.
My personal sense is what is happening with AI. It is something like industrial revolution that happens more than 100 years ago, right? That kind of thing is taking place in front of our eyes. Whether it will be successful, whether it will be failure, we don't know. But there are green shoots of that kind of massive thing that could be in the making. So So how do you feel that this whole AI proposition is
Hmm.
likely to change the way business over next 3, 5, 7 years? And obviously people piece becomes all the more important in this, because all the bottom of the pyramid tasks are going to be automated by AI. So you need these people to go to next level to next level. The one layer of pyramid is actually going to be not there, right?
So it'll be very difficult for me to not make this comment before I start answering your question, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times when I meet businesses about growth and scaling, and I always talk about it, scaling requires you to build repeatable modular components where your cost starts coming down, your revenue grows exponentially. Anyone in software, if you're going on tweaking your product for your client, you're not building a scaling business.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. What you said about people and the pushback, right? That is what I said earlier also about mindset. It all starts with the mind. There is a comfort zone, there is a reality of where I am, and till I am pushed to change, most people will not change, right? It is that inertia, right? And there is some external stimulus that pushes you. Very few people are internally driven to say that I need to change. And as a matter of fact, that's a lot of times, that's what I'm trying to make people understand, that you have to be internally driven to achieve anything that you're out there to achieve, right? So I'm not surprised that you get that, and don't be surprised that you will get that for everything. Only thing is, today a lot of stuff is much more amplified because of the way we are connected through technology, that this same thing happened even in when my dad started working, or my mom started working, right? They face the same thing. Every time they, as young people, came into the organization, they both face the same thing. We used to hear it as conversations at lunch and dinner, not lunch. That's how it was, right? So this pushback to anything new is always going to be there. And that is because all technology, including AI, and AI is not new, it's been around for a while, as you know, right? It's going through its own, for a while, and it's been going through its own generation, right? This movement that you're seeing, and use case applications that you're seeing. So you're seeing an application. So while the base technology is improving continuously, its application is also improving continuously. Right. So chatbots have been around for like ever. So you see, the reality is that is what is happening. Now, anything which is from a technology perspective, if you go back in time and you think about computers, industrial becoming personal, and what that did to that, or internet when it started became more mainstream, and then application, and now everyone, right? Or if you look at social media, when it started, it just started in a very small way. Then it boomed, and today, you have everyone on it, and new platforms are constantly coming out, and new things are constantly coming out. I'm sure you're on Thread and all of that, and you're hearing what's happening there, right? So the truth is, this is the movement of anything. Initial hype, right? A lot of people, curiosity, figuring it all out. Is it for me? It's always a smaller group of people who are talking about it, smaller group of people getting excited about it. Then starts adoption, right? People then start, more and more use cases keep coming up, more and more success keeps happening. And then you have a situation where it's either growth or decline, because if it's not managed to effectively do its job, and metaverse is a good example of that, you have a lot of hype, then you have what is happening, and then now you have what is, I don't want to comment, right? But at that time itself, when the hype was on, I made some I would like to believe, witty comments. So, the reality is, on AI as well, it's been in play for a while. More and more case studies will come in, more and more, I would say, applied AI, so to speak. You will see that then move in its own trajectory and take off, right? I don't think there's anything so far that tells me that it isn't going to significantly change lives. It is already doing it, and it has been in play for a while. It will continue to be. It's the application in various industries and in various personal level, as well as the corporate level, the industrial level, business level. More and more you'll see it in play. And there's a very interesting thing that I have heard and I agree with that you are not going to be replaced by AI. You are actually going to be replaced by someone who understands AI, right? Of course, some jobs will become redundant, but that has happened from time immemorial, right? And new jobs will come up. So there was a time when all of us, I believe that ancient civilization was a lot more evolved than we've understood, but at least from a recorded history perspective, we were hunter-gatherers, farmers, settlers, blah, blah, blah. New jobs came up, some we started doing less. And here we are, right? So the truth is the evolution of the human and the evolution of civilization and evolution of that will happen. Now, every technology, good or bad, outcomes will happen. There are certain bad outcomes that are also going to happen from an AI overuse in certain places. It's already happening on social media, right? Any technology can be for good or bad. Any new innovation, any new discovery can be for good or bad. And we will have both of those coexisting. So I don't think you need to think about whether it's going to impact life. It's already impact life. It's already impacting. It will continue to impact. As a matter of fact, it will impact at scale because very soon you will see it at the growth stage, right? So it's been like kind of creeping, and then it just takes off. And suddenly it's a bit like how it happens with other things that you've seen, whether it's internet or whether it's social media. You will see it take off. You will see everyone being impacted by it. You will see those people who were crying about it having to suddenly jump onto it or being left out. And certain generations will get away with it, but the younger generation is going to be faced with it. They don't have a choice.
Yeah, in fact, if one thing that COVID taught us, apart from health benefits, is this: whatever is coming, you better adapt to it and start seeing how best you can make it use in your favor instead of trying to repel it, push back. The technological adoption that has happened cross industry, right? That is something that we all must remember.
And did you also see how people did adapt to it?
Yeah.
So the human ability to adapt to something at scale is also very high.
Yes.
Right? Because I would say a vast number of people are more comfortable or are still driven. They're not more comfortable, they're more used to it, to be driven by external stimulus and external acceptance. So if everyone is doing it and you're not doing it, you will not survive. So yeah.
The FOMO factor is real, right?
JOMO is my life. I am one of those. I've always been a JOMO person. So
no, absolutely. That is very important, right? The kind of adventures that we undertake in our lives, for you, for that matter, right? Working at Tata and now transforming companies, it's already enough adventure in life. You don't want to have more.
No. More than no. I'm also the kind of person who will go and just jump off and bungee jump. I'm one of those as well. So if you're not living on the edge, you're wasting space is something that I read when I was a teenager. It kind of stayed in my mind. So everything I just try to get the max out of, and I'm constantly learning. But this is something that I talk about, that is kill the noise. So because the voice that I hear is my own, and a few trusted people, my inner circle for my personal life, and the trusted people for anything in the professional life. Everyone else, not interested. Not interested at all. Your noise. Sorry to disappoint you, but it's unsolicited opinion and I'm not interested in your opinion. It sounds arrogant, but it's also a way of saying centered. How do you stay centered? So I think a lot of this hype that you're hearing around AI, some of it is hype, some of it is noise. You've got to figure out how does it make sense for me, my career, my organization, depending if it's the individual or whether it's the organization. What do I need to do for my organization to thrive and not become irrelevant? What am I missing out? Right? And in all of this noise, what is that signal that I need for my organization, my industry, my growth? Right? So that is all that you've got to be focused. It's not selfish. It's not self-absorbed. It's being aware.
Absolutely. So we are almost at the end of our conversation, and I hate it because the conversation is just amazing. The kind of discussions we are having. The school children are very close to my heart. The school and
Okay.
college students, right? They are the ones who are most confused when things like this happen, which are like drastic changes happening in the fabric outside. There is a discussion around, do the startup, that's the future. Then there are people who are comfortable doing the jobs, and they're like, oh, but and if and all those sort of things that goes in their head, right? With the massive redefinition of everything that we are seeing, and it is not new, it has been happening, right? So what is your perspective on how should these students who are in their 10th, 12th, or in their graduation, how should they keep away from this noise and focus on building a successful life, if we can call it, right? This is like taking you back into your 20-25 years. And
Yeah, that's why for a second I was like, yeah, that's interesting. You see, so there are two ways to, I mean, there's one which is a fact, right? Which is that new careers will keep evolving and emerging, right? As like you said about technology, right? I would say like when we were in school, we got exposed to physics, chem, math, bio, history, geography, languages. So you had, we did English, Hindi, Marathi, French, right? So you got exposed to all of that. You had art classes, you had moral science, you had physical education, you had all of these things that were kind of, you got exposed to. And then you kind of ran with it to build your career. So, I mean, I went and did my science, then I did my economics, then I went and did MBA, then years later, I did my fellowship to study further in electric vehicles. So it's like you figure out, and at every chunk, you kind of take it. For the last generation, you just did all of this, then you worked, and then you were retired. In my generation, already it happened that, you know what, you just didn't, you have to keep, which is why you said you go back, you study some more, you add to it. So after working X number of years, I go to my fellowship, stop. Now today I'm continuously learning new things. So we have that. Now, unfortunately, for the generation that's following, why I say unfortunate is because if they don't make their mindset shift, it's going to be hard. So it's not about just doing this degree and then that's it for life, right? You don't have that option. Already we don't have that option. So they're never going to have that option. Just accept it. You're going to have to continuously learn, but you've got to learn in chunks, right? And so, for instance, at this stage, if you start getting exposed, like you got exposed to all of these other things like physics, chem, math, and languages, and social sciences, and all of that, you have to start getting exposed to coding, blockchain, get an exposure to what it is from a point of view of data science, data management, what is IoT, all of that, right? You start getting exposed to it, and then you start developing an interest in it. You move in that direction, and you go into application. So you could, I mean, this is very fascinating because you could go to esports, which is now a career option, or you could go become a risk management data scientist, or just become somebody who's in data security, right? As long as you get exposed to things in an early stage, or none of this you do, and you just actually go into a space of application in a different way. So tech enabled. Every other industry is not pure tech play, it's tech enablement, right? So technology is that underlying thing which enables a certain outcome. So for me, young people just keep getting exposed to stuff like that. These are foundational courses, pick them up. But something that I was growing up with, and I remember thinking to myself, my God, why is nobody taught that? Was personal finance, right? Literally, you were never taught personal finance in school. And for me, there are certain things that as young people, equip yourself on that. And second, really big one, and we get so obsessed with technology, we forget the most basic stuff. Finance, how will you manage your life? Two, mental health.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So those things, we are becoming a more connected country or world, but you're also becoming a more isolated world. So you are, as much as you're getting more connected, you're also getting more isolated. And if you don't know how to manage your emotions, don't know how to manage all of that, that's when a lot of these problems start happening. So that brings me again to that same thing that I told you about my own, this thing is kill the noise.
Yeah.
And understand that there are certain people you should take advice from, and everyone else is noise, even if they are closest to you.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, please ask the question.
So my daughter is 12 years. She's preteen, right? And
Mm.
and I know that this is the right way, that you need to remove the noise and focus on the right set of people, hear from the right set of people. Still, I find it very hard to convince her that this is how it
You
should
are
be,
the
because
wrong person. So, that once you hit those teen years, the parent is that one person who you don't listen to. So it's a very it's and it happened with you as well, right? Because the evolution of human society is that every generation improves on what the previous generation has done, which means you will take stuff from the previous generation, but you will think for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, in the formative years, all the input that you have given, and that's really where I say bless my parents, because they put in a lot of the value system, good behavior, gave the basic education, and stretched themselves to give me whatever, and then make fun of my silly notions. That's what their role was, right? But as you move into the teen years, you have to facilitate them being able to pick up those good voices. Right. And you've got to understand that your role after that point is a facilitator role to ensure that you're one watching that they are in the right company, because that job is your job as a parent. Yeah. But at the same time, you're making it possible for them to have access to that knowledge. Right. So in my time, when there was no internet, when we were growing up, and because I always loved business, my parents facilitated it that I could attend an AGM. They facilitated it that I went and I met all the credit rating agencies at that time and asked them to give me all their reports free. So I actually went and knocked the door of 4 of the credit rating agencies and collected company reports from them and studied it. Right? But even the idea of which credit rating agencies, they said, you can go. This is an idea. Why don't you go there? Or then British Council Library, which was in Nariman Point at the time, they got me the membership of that. So after college, I'd go and spend out there and read it. So those inputs are important from a parent's perspective. Today, it's so much easier because you've got access to information, but it's also harder because there's too much information.
Yes.
Right. So how do you kind of give them guidance? I'd gone and met some really strong people at that time in business, because my uncle had connected me or my aunt had connected me. My parents were connecting me. I would go and talk to those people. So they were connecting and stepping back. Then they'd come back and say, how was it? Some of it I'd share, some of it I'd not share if I didn't like the experience. I'd just say, oh, it was okay. Or you won't understand, because that's just
that's
who you are as a child, right? But those things form. So you've got to, as a parent, ensure that they have those. As you're older, I actually train people to do this when I do my self-leadership course, which over now 800 people have gone through. Wow. So self-leadership is at that senior, slightly mid to senior, because it's a lot more complex as your life, right? At that stage, I actually remind people to do this growth, maintain and eliminate, which is not my concept. I've read it. Where you actually look at people around you and you think, which are these voices that I need to eliminate? If I can't eliminate them because it's a family member who's constantly dragging me down, how do I create a maintained schedule with them? Which is that I know in my back of my mind that now I'm going to meet this person, or I'm going to speak to this person. This person is generally a drag on my energy. How do I protect my energy and say, look, I'm just going to be maintaining the relationship here. I'm not going to be affected by this relationship. Yes. So eliminate and maintain. And then the biggest group is growth. Who do you think are the people who are going to help you grow? And I often see that, look, when you become a mentor to people or you become a coach to people, they will ask you first about your expertise. Before you know it, they're asking you about everything. And as a joke, right? So sometimes I've had people come and say, okay, what do you think is the best school for my child? And I'm like, how am I the authority on that? Right? Now, believe you me, if I didn't have this behavior, a normal person will immediately start giving feedback. Yeah. This school is good, that school is a blah, blah, blah. But I've had no children go into any school. So how am I the authority? I can give you a conceptual framework to evaluate your schools. And that's where I'll stop. Right? But normal people do what? Give gyan on topics that they are not experts on. So your ability to know, is this the person who's an expert on this topic, and do I need to give credence to their views? Or is it just an opinion that is not based on expertise? And if it's an opinion not based on expertise, ignore.
Absolutely, that is very important.
Don't keep them around you, actually. Don't even keep them around you.
Yeah, you should know the right doors to knock, and you should know what is right, right? That comes from the formative year value system, right?
I would also urge you to understand that sometimes you might find it difficult to get those growth mindset friends. It's not
Hmm.
easy.
Hmm.
It's okay to be alone rather than surround yourself with voices that bring you back down. So today you have access to books, you have podcasts, you have video, which you are doing, and hopefully people find value and take away something from it. And that's what it is. They might not know you, but they know your podcast, they know
Yeah.
about your video cast, they listen to you, and in a way, you become that expertise voice in their head, right? That expertise voice needn't be somebody I know personally.
Yeah.
Through your own work, you will end up being that growth friend for somebody without being friend in the technical sense.
No, absolutely, absolutely. This conversation has been really lovely, Delna. We talked about life, business, school, students, right? How should you build a life out of this living? That is what is more important. So if people wants to reach out, what are your coordinates?
Honestly, the best way is to drop me an email or to write on LinkedIn, right? Because those are, I am extremely brutal about managing my time and energy. So as a result of that, if people ping me, I respond at the time that I am in the space of responding. And it's always very quick. It's always been like that. That's because I work in chunks and I'm very efficient. So if you drop a note on the website, which is of course my name because I'm so full of myself, so it's delnaavari.com, or you can drop a message on LinkedIn. Prasant, I think a lot of people don't even realize we don't know each other, right?
Yeah.
You just dropped me a message and said, I'm going to do this, and would you be open to chatting? And I said, yeah, sure, right? And how long did it take to set it up? So the truth is that if you have a decent idea or you need something, and I'm in a position to actually participate in your journey, I will participate. If I'm not in a position to participate, I'll say, look, I'm not the best person for you. And there's no offense to it. So LinkedIn, website note, or then contact@delnaavari.com, which is the email ID. It's easy. And we will, either my team members or I will immediately respond, within reasonable working hours.
Yeah, and I see you're quite active on LinkedIn, sharing your perspectives in that bite-sized learning, right? How do you grow your business? So 3 pointers to make sure that you're on right track,
That
right?
is the team. They said, "Oh, you write this long form, but can you do these bite-sized things?" And they nudged me, and so I've done it. So the credit goes to the younger generation, the younger millennials and Gen Z. All credit to them. They are the ones who push me to do those.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
tell
my
me
thing
quick.
is, yeah, tell me in three, tell me two. But if you
Exactly.
see my answer in that, also very often will say, you're fooling yourself if I can tell you take 3 books. I
Yes,
mean, what?
exactly.
Tell
Three
you three
types of book, then
areas.
you tell them.
Yeah. So
And
yeah.
and if you
Yeah,
look
please.
back, right, about a decade ago, the cash line used to be 10 ways of doing it. Then it
Hmm.
became 7 ways of doing it, then five, and now we are at three. So,
Oh God,
so
yes, I know. Yeah, but everyone's looking for a shortcut. There is no shortcut. I keep trying to explain, and there is no best way to do it, and there is nothing perfect. And I mean, a lot of people thought I was an absolute idiot to walk out of such a successful career, and including my entire ecosystem. Nobody in my ecosystem was happy about it. Some of them encouraged me and said, do what makes sense to you because you've always been successful. Many people were worried that I was doing this because something was wrong. And I said, nothing is wrong. They're all my friends. I love them to bits. And they all still support my journey. So it has to make sense to you, right?
yeah.
And that's what I keep saying. It has to make sense to you. Somebody else might think you're making a mistake. As long as you're happy, it's enough.
You have one life, right? You can't have different lives for different things.
Well,
So
there is a quantum theory, and there are other things that say that we are all living our past, present, and future in parallel lives. But I think that's a different video cast.
that's an interesting one. Yeah, I saw that. But I know only of this life, right? So I
Yeah.
have
So
this
right
life
now
which I
you're
need to
conscious
live.
of this life, so make it something that you enjoy living.
Absolutely, that is very important. And that is one thing I'd normally tell people in my teams and the younger ones. The work, the success, that definition will keep on changing. What doesn't change
Absolutely.
is happiness out of it. Right?
Correct.
So I think I've taken more time of yours, but it was lovely talking to you, Delna. Thank you for
No,
giving
it's
me
been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. And I wish you tremendous success, because what you're trying to do is actually, as I said, be one of those growth friends for people who need that insight, who might not get it in their immediate ecosystem. And I think people like you who are taking that out are actually, filling that gap for people. So I wish you absolute success. Go on, rock.
And I have nice people like you who take out time on a cold request to join and share the life journey. That makes this whole thing doable and
You'll
amazing.
always find that. You'll always find that, because if you put that out, you put a good intention out, your good intention will be answered. So wish you absolute success in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Delna. Take care.
Thank you.